I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have one matter before us, since this will actually be my last chairmanship of this committee, and I haven't been reassigned to this committee. I thought it would be a good idea to have us review the Neighborhood Council Review Commission's report and see how we did on implementing the 73 recommendations from that commission's work. So with that, we will call for item number 1.
Item number 1 is a CLA, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, City Clerk, and former members of the Neighborhood Council Review Commission to report on the status of the implementation of the 73 recommendations from the Neighborhood Council Review Commission's final report. Council member, you have asked for the CLA's office to provide, to submit a report on the implementation status of the 73 recommendations included in their report. So before us are the 73 recommendations, and in summary, of the 73 recommendations, 33 recommendations have been implemented, 14 recommendations are in the process of being implemented, 5 recommendations are pending at the Education and Neighborhoods Committee, 5 recommendations are partially implemented, 2 recommendations have not been implemented, 11 recommendations have not been fully implemented and are ongoing, 1 recommendation can be received and filed, 1 recommendation is pending in City Council, and 1 recommendation requires action by the mayor.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to have Mr. Sonnenschein come up.
Sure. Hey, Rick.
Good morning, Councilman Alarcon.
Good morning.
Rafe Sonnenschein, former Executive Director of the Neighborhood Council Review Commission. And with your permission, the Vice Chair of the Commission is here as well, Jason Lyon. Would you mind if I invited him to join me up at the podium?
I'm sure that would be fine.
First of all, I would like to thank Councilman Alarcon and the members of this committee for really, in effect, making sure that this process was carefully watched. It's so easy with commissions for recommendations to go by the wayside and not be pursued, and I think that you have really kept this alive after the commission ended, and we're very grateful to you for that and to your close attention and your holding hearings to draw the public in as well. I would just have a few small comments, and then I would answer any questions you would have, and I'm sure Jason would as well. Many of the recommendations have been implemented, especially some of the most important ones. I think the most critical one was that the city clerk to run the elections for the neighborhood councils. I think we can agree that that was the thing that'll be remembered the most as the biggest and most significant positive change coming out of the commission. Many others are either in process or implemented. A few that remain to be done, one is the peer grievance process still needs to be implemented, and we made quite a bit of progress on that, but I think there's still some work to be done. The question of a sunshine law, which is very important and controversial, but important as to the status of the neighborhood councils. One other thing is to the question of conflict of interest, which I think I'd have to say on behalf of the commission that that's one area where I think the city went in a somewhat different direction than the NCRC recommended. And I hope that in time some of that will be revisited, because one of the fundamental recommendations of the commission was to reduce paperwork and reduce bureaucratic requirements, and I think that the city adopted a direction which is probably contrary to that spirit. And while I understand what, sort of the interest in that and the conflict of interest question, I hope we can revisit that down the road. Two more things is that to look at this as a holistic process, which is that we're not done. There's so much more to be done to make sure that this is revisited and that everything is carried through. But I have to say, the department, I think, has really responded very positively to all the recommendations. I think they have now a very strong management team, and many of the problems that were the most obvious, such as in finance, I think they're on the road to fixing those. A last thing is not on the list of recommendations, but I would just like to ask Councilmember Alarcon's advice and the committee's support on this. At the very end of the process, the commission voted to maintain the website as a passive website, not an active one, because it has all of our materials, including all the deliberations, so people can go back and see what was discussed. We did it on our own because we had to move very quickly. It's not a city website. In the interim, the vendor has been maintaining it for free at cost to that person, and he's getting a little tired of it, and has basically said either somebody can take this off our hands or we're going to have to take it down. And it was the last thing the commission decided, so that the next commission, which would be in, 5 to 7 years, something like that, would be able to just pick up right where we left off. So any help we can get to figure out what to do about that would be very helpful to us.
This is the commission's website?
The commission's own website, ncrcla.org, which has all the materials that you'd ever want to have to go back and look at the documentary record of the commission. It would need a few changes. Obviously, the interactive pieces would have to be taken out, and because you're not going to, it would be a passive website. And some of the language has to be made compatible with the cities. But it's not easy, but hopefully there'd be a way to do it. And lastly, just to suggest that this committee and the council look again in not too long to just make sure that the spirit of the recommendations has been carried out as much as the letter of the recommendations. And I would just stop there unless Jason wanted to.
I have nothing to add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Good morning. Janice Hahn joins us. I'll hold my comments for now. If you could just stick around. We have some public comments. Do we have another mic? No? Okay. If you could share it. You don't have to leave.
Should we? Oh.
Oh, this is an extra mic. Yeah.
I'd have to
Oh, you didn't have to leave. I'm going to go ahead with a public comment period. Barbara Monahan Burke.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having us here. I'm Barbara Monahan Burke. I'm a member of the board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, representing also the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, the Los Angeles Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, and the DWP committee under Soledad Garcia. I want you to know that we are very concerned about the charter and whatever comes out of what I call the 912 Commission recommendations. To date, we feel the charter's intent and writings are not being supported within this city to do with neighborhood councils, and we are going into this. I'm sorry you will not be the chair anymore because I have worked with your staff a little bit on this. But we'll go forward with this through this committee as it goes forward. As I say, the intent and even the writings of the charter have not been followed through on the neighborhood councils, particularly to do with us being able to advise not only city council, but commissions, the mayor, and departments. The thought out there has always been that you advise solely your city council member, and that's not so. So we can really have a lot more effect than we have been having, and we intend to put this in writing and figure out how to make this work. I would like to say, pardon me? I would like to say it even goes to, even though it's advising the city, when you read the charter, it goes to whatever local concerns are that would go up to the county and the state and the federal government. So though we are advisory, we are part of this system, and we should be taken seriously. And I feel that we have not been taken seriously by a great number of the city council, not the two of you. You have both really taken us seriously. But there's some opposition to neighborhood councils. And I see, I would like to just say one other thing. I see over and over where the Central City Association always demonizes neighborhood councils and puts us down over and over and over to this day. And this type of thing has to be dealt with. So I'm spearheading this for all these organizations, and I intend to have a report ready by the end of this month so that as we go forward with the fall session, it will come to this committee. And I hope to give a copy to you too, Councilmember Alarcon, because I'm sure you will have some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Ring?
Actually, I was, good morning, council folks. I was actually here to speak under general comments, but I would like, as long as I'm here, I will take a moment to tell you that my particular interest in neighborhood councils is to see that we can create a coalition of education committees around the city to actually bring community members into what's taking place, particularly around K-12 issues in our public schools in Los Angeles. And there's a public school choice resolution that's getting a lot of generating a lot of controversy coming up before the Board of Ed on the 25th of August. And what a wonderful opportunity it would have been to be able to vet some of these things at our education committees and our neighborhood councils. So I don't have particular comments other than I know that there are some who are having issues with the lack of a grievance process, particularly in Venice. I read about it all the time. Other than that, I'd just like to say I'd like to see more power given to the communities as a part of neighborhood councils, and thank you for your good work.
Thank you. Ida Talala? I hope I said that correct.
Good morning. I'm a member of the Neighborhood Council, Greater Echo Park Aleutian Neighborhood Council, and when I wasn't a member and just a stakeholder, I worked as part of an ad hoc committee when a document from the Review Commission came. I think it is a wonderful document as a start. However, the 7-year lapse of time in between is far too long. Far too many neighborhood councils are having problems and not addressing it. Dunn is working far too slowly to improve, and I don't think a 7-year lapse for review is much too long. You need an interim at least 3 years to partial review and 5 years rather than 5. I also feel that some of the recommendations here, the peer review, is absolutely inadequately addressed by anybody. And I think far more thought needs to be given. It has done nothing but create acrimony rather than have resolution. I also feel that Dunn's role needs to be clarified. We also need to know how much it's costing the city to give neighborhood councils $1. Is it costing the city an enormous amount to maintain neighborhood councils? The Sunshine Law, I believe, neighborhood councils have not really addressed the issue of how they manage themselves. To thrust upon them the Sunshine Law is to ask for more problems. I think it needs a wider discussion. Thank you. Thank you for the work done. Thank you.
I have Cindy Ortiz. Did you want to speak on item number 1, or did you want to make a general public comment? Cindy Ortiz?
She just left. She wanted, I think, public comments.
Okay.
Just as I did too.
Okay. Augustine Cebada?
Committee members, Chairman Alarcon, Agustin Cevada, representative for District 2 of Greater Echo Park Aleutian Neighborhood Council. You know, I laud you for saying in this review, that there will be Dunn will pay for the translation services. That's very important for the participation of non-English speaking members, stakeholders in our communities. However, what I think is a weakness is the item number 25, that Bank shall play a role as a final appeal for the grievance system, but it doesn't specify how it is. Will it override? Will it accept the grievance procedures, or what? It's very vague. At this point, our grievance procedures are very inadequate. There's a lot of problems. They have not been followed through. We're very slow on what the timelines are, and we need that to be taken care of. Other than that, I agree that the procedure of reviewing the neighborhood council's work over 7 years is too long. It probably should be 2 or 3 years, because we've had, I've been working with the neighborhood council there in Echo Park for it's like 5 years now, and nothing has come forward. I also think that the question of having a uniform bylaws set up is very important, because in our neighborhood council, bylaws have been changed every couple of years, and to the benefit of the powers that are elected chair, and they follow them sometimes when they want to, and they interpret them however they want to, and it's not fair to the rest of us board members or to the stakeholders, and that needs to be reviewed and controlled by Dunn more actively. This has not taken place, but those are my general comments on this issue, and I think that this review process needs to be updated like every 3 years. Thank you.
Dr. Williams? Clyde? You're up.
Good morning. Clyde Williams from El Sereno, LA 32 Neighborhood Council. One of the youngest neighborhood councils in the 89. The bookkeeping and especially the documentation that has to be done by the board members becomes very onerous, because these are all volunteers. They barely have enough time to do the work. They're not retired like others of us. They're not supported to do the public outreach. However, they come every month, 10, 20, 30 people, times 12, times 2 to 3 hours. It's one of your best buys as far as getting people that really care about their neighborhoods to perform. But then we have to do this, and we have to do this. And our treasurer ran out crying because she had been commented on. However, she keeps working free. And I have brought up many times the special events in the city council. You spend $5-10 million right there and administrating them. And does anyone ever audit them? Do they audit them as much as they do the neighborhood councils? I don't think so, because I think your best buy is to have the neighborhood councils take over that. They know most about the neighborhoods. And every time I see, $5,000, $2,000, $1,000, or all costs to be reimbursed sometime in the future, your neighborhood councils should be protected, should be encouraged, should be better. Thank you.
Did Cindy return? Okay. Ms. Han?
Yes?
Ms. Han is
Here?
present. Would you like to make some comments?
Yes. Thank you. I, a couple of comments, just maybe have both of you comment on the grievance procedure. It sounded like there's still some issues with that, and maybe how you think it ends up, and is it better? I'm interested in whether or not, there was a lot of controversy over the council files. And I'm curious to know, with that recommendation, what's been our participation rate so far? How's that going? Everyone was worried that neighborhood councils would, kind of take over the legislative process at the city council level. How's it going? How do you see it, really playing out in the future? The other thing I was going to ask you about was a recommendation of the disclosure form. How do you feel that's working? I know I had a lot of concerns about that. So maybe just a couple of those comments on those recommendations specifically. I mean, there's 73. I mean, we're not going to talk about all of them here, I don't think. And the other, maybe there was a couple of public comments on, are we waiting too long to do this review? I know that, I believe the first time around, I think we had, the charter said no more than 7 years. And what's your maybe recommendation on when we take a look at these new recommendations that have been implemented?
You want to talk about the council file? And I'll talk about the grievance, because I know about what's going on with the grievance.
Well, talk about our, I don't know all of what's gone on since we sort of shut everything down, but I will talk about our thinking, and then maybe. To the grievance process, we left its outlines. We gave a very kind of broad idea of what we thought it should be.
Right.
And then left it to be implemented by the department and the neighborhood councils. And to the recommendation, I think that was commented on, it seemed important that there be a final stop. We didn't necessarily think that Bonk should play a huge role in the process.
There needs to be
and in
some
fact,
more
we
work.
tried to kind of put in that they would only take certain kind of appeals that kind of had system-wide import. But mostly it would be settled within the system and preferably regionally. But,
And is that working?
how far along are we?
Well, what happened with this is there was a working group has been created, which included the the CLA, the city attorney, the clerk, council, CD7. Who else was on that committee? Who else was represented? Is that pretty much? Actually, made a great deal of progress on really nailing it down. Turned out there were some complications. Literally, how would things work? I think I would say we were not far from having a plan that could work. Would that be? That's where I last was included in that. The idea would be that the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners would be the last stop, and the idea
Right.
was this should not be flowing over to the City Council,
Right.
and it should be authoritative, and it should be in writing,
Right.
so that people would have to write on a form
Right.
what their specific complaint was, and also what they want to have, what action they want it taken. So it wasn't
Right.
just a.
So is that procedure in place?
I believe it's not, right? Or is it-
Bong Wan Kim, General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. It is not currently in place. The department is coming up with the procedures and an implementation plan. We expect to be up and running in about 6 months.
6 months?
Yes.
And just a caveat, Gwen Poindexter, City Attorney, the procedures are going to have to be codified in the plan of the ordinance, so we're waiting for the policy.
So what happens
chapter.
now when someone has a grievance?
Well, the first line has always been the neighborhood council procedures. So there's a lot of moving parts to this grievance system that I think wasn't fully addressed by the commission.
Right.
One is that what we're looking to do, one of the recommendations that the commission had come up with was standardization of bylaws. So that's something that our commission will look at. The two are interlinked. So we have 89 different sets of bylaws with different sets of grievance
Right.
procedures. Some of
Okay.
them address them better than others.
Right.
What we need to do is standardize the grievance procedure at the neighborhood council level that then connects to the regional and
Okay.
citywide system. So there are a lot of moving
So do you
parts
think,
to this.
so you
grievance
think
system.
now some of them are being worked out?
Some of them are.
Because I will tell you, I've been with this since the very, very, very beginning. And I will tell you, when I was chair of this committee, there was so many more grievances that did spill into the city council, particularly at this level. Not feeling like that's happening right now. I mean, we don't really get in this committee those kinds of major grievances. They were really about elections
That's
They're
you
mostly
know,
about elections.
Yeah, so I'm sort of sensing that either things are working out or that the individual bylaws are somehow addressing some of these grievances. Is that accurate?
well, when we were in operation as a commission, I'd say the vast majority of complaints we heard about had to do with elections. And once it was devised that the city clerk would play a role, I really think that had a tremendous impact on people feeling that the operation would be more uniform and professional. So I do think that took a certain amount of pressure off the system. And now it would be easier to implement a grievance process for any election challenges, but with the clerk involved, I think it does change the whole nature of things when you're dealing with a respected agency that's used to running these things.
Let me just, one more thing, it's recommendation number 10, which was the community impact statements, which it was interesting, hearing you speak about how you don't feel like you're only advising your council member and not, other levels, which to me is the community impact statement. I mean, and I still feel like that is an extremely underutilized tool with neighborhood councils. I feel like every time I hear people who are not in my council district complain about not being able to speak or get the attention of council members, I still go back to this community impact statement, which has to be written on our council agendas. I mean, we literally have to read it when it comes to that item. It's not being used, in my opinion. Why not? Is the training not there? Is it the process is too burdensome or cumbersome, or why isn't the community impact statements being used more?
I think what we heard in testimony again and again and again
Right.
was that people felt like it was too late in the process.
Okay.
It was showing up on the agenda, and the vast majority of the council members, the perception at least, was that they were coming into that process with their decision well made. And so it wasn't, in terms of a tool of advocacy, it wasn't very effective. It was good as a tool of transparency, of kind of holding people's feet to the fire and making a council member kind of respond to the neighborhood councils in their district,
Right.
particularly if they disagreed with the recommendation. But as an advocacy tool, and I think the commission probably agreed with that, it's not so effective that late in the game.
Yeah, but then you would say public comment that day on a particular agenda item would fall in that same category.
I think a lot of people also felt that way.
That's interesting because, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I know many, many times I come in and I do listen. I do pay attention. I think that the naming of Sherman Oaks was one of those where we both kind of came in thinking we were maybe going to punt it and just kind of send it to the city council. But after really seriously listening to the testimony, which neighborhood council actually was on a different side, but I felt very, very strong on how I wanted to respond. So, like I said, I can only speak for myself, but I really do look at the community impact statements. I want to see what a neighborhood council has said about a certain agenda item. So,
As you know, I also really believe in community impact statements and said many times that Silver Lake never submitted a community impact statement that went unnoticed by you. That wasn't always true for our council members, though.
yeah, well,
So-
but again, it's neighborhood councils are not supposed to be just an advisory group to the council member. They really are supposed to be advisory to the council at whole, to commissions, to boards, I've had my neighborhood councils have sent letters to the President of the United States, so.
If I might
more
offer
power
one
to them. Yeah.
kind of further to that same point, recommendation number 5 was really designed to speak to that a little more, which was to create
what?
processes, and it looks like it's pending here in the committee, which was to ask the mayor to direct the departments to really put some thought into designing their system or publicizing their system of taking input from the public. And it looks like maybe we could do some work there that I think would be effective to that end, which is
Okay.
that early in the process, while
Right.
the departments are putting together
Right.
recommendations,
Right.
if we had a clear system of participation. it would
Okay,
help.
that's an interesting goal. And then just, nobody's really answered my question on council files. How have neighborhood councils begun that process? Have they had to fill out a disclosure form to do that? How's that?
They are currently required to fill out a financial disclosure form. The response from a lot of the neighborhood councils is that the disclosure form itself was a major barrier to their participation. It is not currently being
Has any
implemented.
neighborhood council filed a council file yet?
No,
Wow.
not according to our records. And you might recall that it's a 2-year pilot, and we're about a year and 3 months left in the pilot, so there is an opportunity for the council to revisit the issue. My understanding is that
Well, I was totally against the disclosure form. Again, with
Yes.
the recommendation number 1, that neighborhood council should remain advisory, to me, sets the course for almost everything else we do, which is why I still have an issue with the disclosure or some of the rules, some of the obstacles that are placed before them. They are advisory, and to me, that guides everything else we do. And it's unfortunate that we still have this issue that the disclosure, I think, is ridiculous. So, but that's very telling. Maybe if no one files a council file, then maybe we do revisit that whole idea.
the other issue I heard when the issue was being debated on the council floor was the issue of ethics training. So our commission and our department are making a big push for 100% compliance with the ethics training requirement. So we feel that should the council revisit it, that we will do our job in terms of making sure that that issue is addressed more adequately.
So the overall state of the neighborhood councils, after the 9/12 Review Commission, after implementing 33 of the 73 recommendations,
After Richard Alarcon.
after Richard Alarcon got on the scene, what's the health of our
I always
neighborhood
have to
council?
remind Janice that I was on the council and voted to create the commission, that she is always recognizing as the beginning of the process.
You
but-
voted to create that other commission.
No, I voted to create the neighborhood council system.
Oh.
And so I remember the early conversations with Michael Fuhrer, and even before Mayor Reardon essentially stole it from him, in the onset of the conversations about secession and trying to reduce the tension and increase the outreach to the various communities, where a lot of these issues were being tossed around at that point. I think the thing that will destroy the neighborhood council system more than anything, or I should say its greatest challenge, is dealing with its own cynicism. It was created in a cynical world. It was created as a result of communities feeling disenfranchised from the central process of government, and that underlying cynicism has sort of permeated the personality of the neighborhood council system at every level. I point to Greg Nelson's. I want to point out we received his recommendations. I think Bonk had, I don't know how many recommendations, 70 something, 73?
73.
73.
Yeah, so I thought it was curious that Greg Nelson also submitted 73 recommendations, and it's interesting that when you read through them,
Where are his?
it talks about geographic diversity, self-evaluation, the Sunshine Law, and all these things that are, to me, essentially administrative stuff. I mean, it's just it creates bureaucracy. It creates a lack of focus. It moves the focus from substantive action at the ground level to administrative action someplace. And when that administrative action doesn't happen to your liking, then it embellishes the pre-existing cynicism. Where I have found the most success in the neighborhood council system is in action, not in administrative action, but in community action. Where I have found the greatest success is when the Sylmar Neighborhood Council fought to close down a high concentration of sex offenders in the motel in Sylmar. When the neighborhood council system joined to fight the DWP rate increase. When when the Sayre Fire took out 500 homes, and the neighborhood council system was first on the scene, even before me, to help respond to the community's needs, and literally hand to hand provided assistance. It was real action. It wasn't complaining about a process. It was actually helping people, which I think was the spirit in which we had the conversation. I most remember the conversation with Michael Fuhr, where it was about creating a community-driven system to do stuff, not to do community action, not to lose your mind over administrative procedures. So, as I will move on to other committees on the council, and my thinking about what has been accomplished since I have been chair of this committee is, it's really the most important thing is trying to move the neighborhood councils to do more action, to get out there and really provide the service, because the substance of the neighborhood council system is not administrative stuff. Mm-hmm. It is that hand-to-hand provision of service out in the community, and I think sometimes that gets lost in the equation, or maybe it just gets lost in the translation between the neighborhood council system and the city council, because I do see the neighborhood councils doing that stuff out in the community, and that's real important. But I also see neighborhood councils that don't know how to spend $50,000 when they get it, and they fight till the day is long about how to get it. I mean, you cry out for more resources, you feel disenfranchised. When you get a little something, you got to do something with it, and they can't make a decision. It's sort of like when I used to do leadership training, and I would put people in groups. Mr. Sonnenschein's probably familiar with this exercise. You take a group of 25 people, you break them up into 5 groups. I would give them a $10 million and say you have 10 different departments. I'd list them from LAPD, the Rec and Parks, all the service-oriented departments, 10 different departments. And I'd say, okay, you have to create a budget. The 5 different groups, as we break up into 5 different groups, you have to create a budget with the $10 million. Everybody has to put in $1. So I say, okay, somebody give me $1. Every group had to give $1. They put $1 in the middle of the room. I said, okay, the first group to come up with a budget will get the $5. And, some groups would instantly say, divided up equally, boom, I get my $5. Other groups are still arguing about the budget and not understanding that the purpose was to create a decision, to get a decision. But the goal, all you had to do was figure out, was the goal to sit there and debate, or was the goal to get the $5? And the groups that understood that the goal was to get the $5 were easily were able to make a decision. But those who wanted to be individual thinkers and not respect others could never come to a conclusion because they wanted to debate. That was their purpose. And the neighborhood council system can be like that if it chooses to be. Each individual council can be like that, and some are like that, where they can't make a decision on anything because they don't know what the goal is. The purpose was not to debate. The purpose was to cause action. And so, so I think we've moved forward in that. And when I kept saying that this product is in its infancy stage, I'm talking about the transition to understanding that the service provision is the primary objective. And the closer we get to that, the better, the more contributive this system will be to the city of Los Angeles. It's not there yet. It's not there yet. We are caught up in a bureaucratic quagmire, and many of the recommendations are intended to expedite those processes, but in fact have caused the reverse, have delayed the process of creating that level of activity in the community. I think, however, the neighborhood councils have gained more respect from the various components. Frankly, the community impact statement to me has a lot less influence on me than a phone call from any one of the members of the neighborhood council. My cell phone is at their pleasure, but I haven't received those phone calls. Don't waste your time on a community impact statement. We just don't.
What's
have
your
the
cell
time.
phone number again?
Are you on the neighborhood council?
We'll put it on our e-blast.
I'm sure that's been done. But the point is that people have to understand how to use their influence. When I train my young senators, I always tell them that you can learn how a bill becomes a law by taking a government class in high school where they tell you it goes from this box to this box to this box to this box. But in terms of understanding the strategies in between the boxes to get it from one box to the next, to understand the demeanor, the relationships, the relationship building, that's a whole different thing. So if we want to create a neighborhood council system that gets lost in the quagmire of boxes, then there are some who would do that. I think these 73, while many of these recommendations are very good from Mr. Nelson, I think we end up spinning ourselves in a world of nonsensical activity that doesn't accomplish the maximum opportunity. And I think that's our goal. I think that's our goal. And so I'm not going to be a cynic. I refuse to be a cynic. I wouldn't have voted for the neighborhood council system from day one. I wouldn't have advised Michael Fuhrer to back off and work with the mayor and negotiate and not walk out of the room without the $5. And then 3 weeks later gets shunned by the mayor and boxed out of the process, and Mayor Reardon ran with it. I wouldn't have advised that if I didn't believe fundamentally in the neighborhood council system. So I think that we can take some pride in some of the accomplishments. The city clerk elections, a very significant accomplishment, needs work, needs a lot of work. And I think the city clerk will be the first to say that. Mm-hmm. It needs work from their perspective to minimize the bureaucracy. At the same time, it needs work from the neighborhood council who need to respect that system. And if they don't respect that system, it's not going to work no matter how they implement it.
But, I mean,
If I could finish my comments, please. This is my last shot, Janice.
all right.
Then it's all yours. Secondly, the recommendations from Bonk, the implementation of the vast majority of those recommendations were I think, probably our most important achievement as a committee. While the committee made recommendations unanimously, I think, that were consistent with the desires of the neighborhood council, with few exceptions. The council as a whole did not embrace 100% of those recommendations and in fact negated some, and most notably the council file action, I think was handled poorly by the council as a whole by tacking on a punitive ethical procedure for no other reason than to belabor the process so that there would be, in fact, no council recommendations emerging. No motions have been made to date. I predict there will be none in the process because, number one, we disrespected the neighborhood councils, and number two, we've created a bureaucratic process that makes it almost impossible for neighborhood councils to have success with the council file. And that's unfortunate because the council file could have produced a plethora of positive results and recommendations that the council as a whole could have used. So In addition, I think we have gained one friendly council member in this time frame. The neighborhood councils were front and center in the 5th Council District debate, and Mr. Koretz had to stand up to that question at every single debate, and I think he did well, notwithstanding the fact he was running against a neighborhood council member. There are other factors in elections that took precedence, but he committed to support the neighborhood council system, and I believe he will more than his predecessor. And that's no criticism, it's just a sign of the time. That means that in the Council District 2 elections, I believe the neighborhood council commitments, the commitment to the neighborhood council system will be front and center. And I think it will be a priority, and even maybe a greater priority. And even, no disrespect intended, but I believe that the next council member will have more respect for the neighborhood council system. So, all in all, I think we've moved forward, but there's still a lot of work to do. My advice to neighborhood councils, by the way, I can't speak for all the neighborhood councils. It's impossible to go to every single one and still serve your council district. But I can speak to the neighborhood councils in my district, and I have a high level of respect for the recommendations. Don't always agree, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of times when I go into a process thinking I'm going to do one thing, and I listen to their concerns, and I do something else. And that's exactly what the process was intended to do. I make some assumptions about my district. I believe I know my district better than any individual out there. But when a group comes together from my district, and it's in a more concentrated area, sometimes they know a lot more than I do. When I used to teach, I used to tell my students, you may be 7th graders, but if your combined knowledge is far greater than mine, if you work together, you can beat me. you can change my mind. And that's exactly where I think the neighborhood councils have been very helpful. So I'm not done, by the way. It's been my pleasure to serve as chair of this committee, and I'm not going to be on the committee, but I think that will be beneficial to the community in the sense that I will remain a strong advocate for the neighborhood council system, and be a voice for empowering the neighborhood council system, not disempowering it or trying to spin it off into a world of confusion. And I look forward to embellishing that. And by the way, as a council member, we can sit in on any committee meetings and sort of act as ad hoc members of any committee we choose to. So I may poke my head in every once in a while. I don't make that a promise, but it may happen. I would also like to thank the various players. Collectively, first the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, they've had a tough time. This is a hard child to raise, and I think they are very dedicated to the cause, but sometimes frustrated at the bureaucracy, and that's understandable. But Mr. Kim, I think all in all, I think you have the you're well intended. Secondly, I'd like to commend Bonk for the tremendous work they did to truly understand the nature of this group and try to make recommendations that represented it, and at the same time, sort of in the notion of when Thomas Jefferson returned from France and Ben Franklin had urged the Congress, and the Congress had supported the creation of the Senate, and Thomas Jefferson went to Ben Franklin and said, "Why did you destroy my democracy?" And Ben Franklin's response was, "To protect you from yourselves." Bonk was doing their work to protect the neighborhood councils from themselves, and that's exactly what I think they did. Sometimes it wasn't appreciated by their charge, but in my opinion, it nevertheless, I think, is helpful. And it's interesting that many of the recommendations, and the 73 recommendations that Greg Nelson made, are in many ways a reflection of the work of Bank, but actually sort of cynically counterposed to the whole notion of Bank. But I think Bank needs to focus on that function, and only that function. I think all the other stuff that Bank does is unnecessary. Just do this, and do it every 2 years. Go to the Congress, the neighborhood Congress, and conduct surveys at that Congress and do this work there. And every year make new recommendations, because this thing is volatile. It's moving, and it changes faster than we can embrace the changes. So we do need to expedite the process more than 7 years. It doesn't have to be as complete. Pick sections, but just move that process forward, and I think it'll create as many beneficial results. In terms of the group setting, let me say thank you to the neighborhood councils for challenging us. At the same time, the challenge, when it was respectful, was most appreciated and most acted on. The city council has the power to ignore you, and that power is a democratic power. And they also have the power to embrace you. They're more likely to embrace you with honey than with a stick. And so I would encourage the neighborhood councils to work with their council member with positive goals and achievements. And I believe that those positive achievements and goals will be embraced by your council member, because they need them too. We can't do everything. We don't even try. But we can certainly do more if the neighborhood councils and council members work collectively together. I personally want to thank Mr. Sonnenschein for the incredible commitment and tremendous job that he did personally, and setting the tone for Bank's recommendations. And I believe they were very healthy for this process. And I think he would be the first to say we have a lot of work to do. So I think all in all, we've created a system. We've committed to that system. We have to recommit and do more. I'm looking forward to the next chairman. Who's the next chair? I don't even know.
They haven't announced yet. We don't know.
That's why I don't know.
They don't know.
It'll probably be the representative from Council District 2, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Eric might stick me back after making that comment. But I think that whoever it is, we have to remain diligent for those of us who believe in the system. I need to